Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Well, recently, of course, Steve Bannon was indicted for failure to appear before Congress, and it looks like he's going to be going to jail, unfortunately, only for maybe a year or two. But of course, Bannon, and folks, it goes back to what I've been talking about for several years. If you're able to spot a con artist, a fraudster, then you can tell what's going on a lot more. And if you can spot one of these guys, you're probably going to be able to spot a whole lot of them simply by noting who the fraudster, the con man that you've spotted hangs around with. These guys all hang in the same circles. So I wanted to talk today about Kyle Bass and his association with Steve Bannon and some other individuals. And I've talked about it before. I haven't focused on it too much. But those of you who have been following me, especially the members and clients, you get the restricted content. You all have the narrative. You understand because I've covered all these things. But I wanted to talk about this issue today because, of course, Bannon is in the news. But you don't hear anything about his link to this money that we're going to talk about that was raised illegally. And it kind of makes you wonder what's going on. Now, of course, it was reported in the news. And this is from a Reuters story. You can see the story on Bloomberg as well. But the key thing is that why aren't people talking about this on CNBC, right? Why isn't this a big topic of discussion? I only accidentally came across this article. Didn't know anything about Bass using illegal funds, illegal money to fund his Hong Kong dollar short bet. So let's talk about this today. And I guess before we begin, I'm going to give a little background on Kyle Bass for those of you who are not familiar. So Kyle Bass, let's go ahead and give a little, show the picture here. He's showing his age. Kyle Bass, actually, I've mentioned this before. I actually worked with Kyle at Bear Stearns in the Dallas office, and didn't see much of him. He had his little special business there, and Kyle basically was an order taker for hedge funds. As far as I know, he didn't really ever manage any money. He didn't. He just basically he had a good business executing orders with the trading desk in New York, Bear Stearns, with hedge funds. And, he got this business and it kind of carried on and on. And, of course, Bear Stearns, just for those of you who don't know, which is probably a lot of you, Bear Stearns, if you worked there, you had that opportunity. Unlike the other brokerage firms, Bear Stearns was it was a unique firm. In fact, before I went there, I didn't even know. I had no idea. If I had known, I don't know if I would have gone there, but Bear Stearns didn't really have any support for the retail side of things at all. And I mentioned I wouldn't have gone there is because I already had a book of retail business. So it was really a bad situation if you wanted to build a retail business. I already had a retail business, but I was still a rookie. I was still, a little over 1 year into the industry. Anyway, my point is that Bear Stearns was a firm that really provided financial professionals, if I can use that term, professionals, when talking about Wall Street or Bear Stearns. It was a place where they were proud to say basically you could do basically any business that you wanted. There was a way to make money, and of course the assumption, I suppose, was a legal way, although that's not necessarily the case for Bear Stearns. There was a way to make money, then the brokers involved in Bear Stearns were able to do so. And Bear had about 7 or 8 offices domestically and maybe about 11 or 12 internationally. So it was a small outfit, similar to, I guess, to some degree. Now, I never worked at Lehman or Goldman, but those who may have and also worked for Bear might agree or disagree. But Bear was, to some degree, structured like Lehman, I would say, more so, and Goldman a little bit, but probably much less so. Bear was unique in that it did a lot of business with brokerage companies, hedge fund companies. Did a lot of clearing business, very large clearing business. And that, in fact, was the reason why Bear Stearns was kind of known as king of the short. They had a large, the Bear Stearns was responsible for a lot of the short positions in the stock market because they dealt with a lot of hedge funds in their clearing business. So with Bear Stearns, you could do business with hedge funds, even though you were a stockbroker, financial advisor, whatever you want to, whatever term you want to call them, Series 7 licensed individuals, right? You could do business with hedge funds. If you ran across a hedge fund, you say, hey, look, I've got, there's only 400 of us at Bear Stearns that are brokers, and we've got a very easy access to the trading desk. We could offer all types of services that other brokers wouldn't be able to do at, say, Merrill Lynch or JP Morgan or Citibank or Smith Barney or you name it, Morgan Stanley. They wouldn't be able to do that type of business unless they were at the very top. They just wouldn't be able to, or if they were, of course, in the investment banking side, they could do some of that business probably. So that was a unique thing about Bear Stearns. And I mean, I actually got involved in a substantial amount of institutional business myself in a very short amount of time. Actually, it was pretty remarkable, I think, looking back, what I was able to achieve. But so that's the thing about Bear Stearns. It was a very unique place. Kyle Bass was doing a lot of business with hedge funds, and from what I understand, they were just basically executing orders through him. So, in fact, when he actually left Bear Stearns, and he was a big producer, he was the number one producer of revenue in that office. And when he left Bear Stearns, I remember they called a meeting, and everybody met where this meeting room where normally it's like a road show or analysts come or something, and the branch manager, who was a gimp. He's a nice guy, but you wouldn't trust the guy for anything. At least I wouldn't. Kind of a sleazeball in terms of his character. One of these guys, they act nice, but are they solid people? Right? No. In fact, I've told the story before many years ago. The branch manager, I'm not going to mention his name, but he actually lied to me. And when he got me to come over from UBS, which I guess at that time probably was still Payne Weber, he lied to me and told me that he was going to give me a certain amount of an offer to get me over there, and it ended up being much less. And of course, you've already moved your book of business. You moved your clients over, so forth, and what are you going to do? Because the fact is that they can you at any point in time and take your book of business. It's a very vicious, disgusting, evil business, Wall Street, and it's unforgiving. So that's another. I've talked about this before. Maybe I'll talk about it more in the future. Of course, things are changing, I'm sure, to some degree. And it depends upon also the firm that you're at. But Bear Stearns, certainly, when you talk about vultures, Bear Stearns would be, towards the top of that list. But anyway, so I remember the branch manager was there, and everybody was all sitting at the table, and Kyle Bass was there, and the branch manager was like, oh, well, we got some bad news. Kyle is leaving. And, to kind of make it like why am I here? I'm thinking, like, why am I here? What's the big deal? What's this have to do with me? Normally when somebody leaves, you don't hear about it. You go to work one day and you see that their desk is empty, and you find out that they mysteriously, secretly left the day before or 2 days before. See, that's how it's done in the industry, right? And I can already tell you right now, this is going to be a two-part video, because I'm getting into the kind of the things that don't really matter with regards to this story. But that's kind of the way it turns out with me sometimes. So, but I think some of you will find this as being interesting anyway. But that's how it works in the industry. You see, you're not supposed to take your book of business. It's done. It's just the way things are. But you're certainly not supposed to take client records. It's done. People do that. And some people will actually sell their book of business to other brokers if they want to leave the industry. I actually did not. When I left the industry, I did not sell my book of business at all. I didn't pursue selling it. I didn't want to sell it because I was disgusted by the industry. I certainly did not want to profit off of my clients by selling their business. And I think that selling the book of business is just immoral. It's of course, I guess, when you're dealing in that industry, you kind of have to look out for yourself, because the firms certainly aren't going to look out after you, especially if you're leaving it. But anyway, so typically you don't hear about when people leave, because once the firm finds out that you're leaving, boom, that's it. If you're working at a brokerage company and you go to your manager and say, well, you know what, Mr. Doodilly, I've decided to move on to Merrill Lynch. And they're going to say, okay, fine. Well, we hate to see you go, and they'll be nice. And the next thing you know, your computer's going to be locked, and they're going to lock you. They're going to let you clear your desk out, and they're going to make you leave immediately, you see. And then after what happened, they're going to make sure you don't take any records either, as well, right? And so what's going to happen is that before you even have a chance to contact your clients, if you haven't already done so, you're going to already have your colleagues are going to be calling them. Okay, and you're going to find out later. So, of course, I'm thinking to myself, when we're called into the meeting room to hear the announcement that Kyle is leaving, I'm thinking, like, so what? Okay, great. Never heard or saw from this guy. Rarely heard or saw from him anyway. It's almost like he wasn't really part of the office, part of the firm. So I didn't give a shit. But that was done to kind of make it look like, oh, Kyle, you're so, you see, folks, in the business in Wall Street, if you're the big producer, then you're God, you see. you're so he kind of wanted to make it look like, oh yeah, bye, Kyle. And so that's kind of the way that went. And so he went off to Legg Mason. Apparently Legg Mason, it's kind of weird how, I guess Kyle didn't, he wasn't treated that way. He was treated a lot better. And so I guess because of the business that he brought to that branch. But so he went off over to Legg Mason. Apparently Legg Mason, which didn't have an office in Dallas, decided to poach him and open an office at Trading Desk, and they designated him as the head or one of the heads of the Trading Desk. And when that sounds impressive, like, oh wow, he gets to head the Trading Desk, all that means is that he's got clients that are going to do business. So basically Legg Mason said, look, we're going to pay you this amount of money, come over to us, bring your customers to us, and we'll let you run the Trading Desk, right? And so of course that's going to sound a lot better to the customers, because you can ask Kyle about the story. He's probably not going to want to waste time telling anybody about it, because he's more involved in trying to his next ploy, and how he can snooker people and get him into another one of his failed bets. So basically you can imagine Kyle's a retail broker. He's just like me and everybody else at that branch at the firm. He's a stockbroker. He's a financial advisor. I mean, actually, I was a financial advisor. That's how I sold myself, because I got my training, as pathetic as it was, through a financial advisory firm, Payne Weber / UBS, right? Bear Stearns was not really, truly, in my opinion, in the financial advisory business. They didn't have any type of educational support. They didn't have any type of educational resources. They didn't care about that. They're a transaction-driven business, and their money management pretty much sucked. So the third-party money management and also in-house money management. So they really weren't geared towards that. So Kyle Bass was a stockbroker. Call him whatever you want, but you can imagine he's got all this business with these hedge funds. And the story goes, basically he went over to Europe for a wedding from a friend or something like that. And at that wedding, apparently, I guess maybe the friend was a hedge fund manager or a friend of somebody. There were several or a few maybe hedge fund managers, and he got in the door that way. And then it kind of, snowballed, and he got a lot of business. But he was a salesman. That's what he was, a salesman. Now, he had a partner. I can't remember his name. I think it was Fitzpatrick or something, which I don't think he went with his hedge fund when he started his hedge fund. I don't know the story about that. But now his partner, I think, might have had a little more respect because he had training. He had formal training through a CFA. And I think maybe he kind of used him to kind of say, hey, we kind of have an idea what's going on. But the bottom line was that they were salesmen. That's what they were. In fact, I'm willing to bet I did a lot more securities analysis when I was at Bear Stearns during that period when I was there, at least, than Kyle Bass did. That's just my own opinion. But anyway, so the point is that that's the industry. That's how it works. And so when Kyle Bass, which, by the way, something didn't work out with the Legg Mason deal, and I think that whole office was scrapped after 1 or 2 years. And that's what I think made him go and start his hedge fund. And so I'm giving you this background, I think, just because it's maybe interesting to some people, but also to kind of emphasize it, who Kyle Bass was. Kyle Bass wasn't, he didn't come from one of these big funds and, he's from such and such fund. He learned this and this and this. Now, Kyle Bass is a stockbroker, which this is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But to go from a stockbroker, a salesman, to some so-called visionary, and of course that was how he was hailed after the subprime collapse, especially due to Michael Lewis, the scam artist moron, who portrayed the events of the financial crisis very inaccurately, a complete fraudster as far as I'm concerned, writing fictional books. And I'll go ahead and mention it once again, folks. These books that have a lot of exposure, if you want to know, and I'm talking about nonfiction books, especially in the investment genre. If they have a lot of exposure, you've heard about them a lot, they've been pumped out there. If you want to understand and get a better idea about these books, and really just about any nonfiction book, the hyped up books, because there's so much review fraud and all the scam artists they have out there, their buddies endorsing the book, and so it's the sheep effect. If you want to see if these books are worth a damn, read the 1-star reviews. Okay, read the 1-star reviews. And this really only applies to the books that are all hyped up, right? The 1-star reviews, and I know this for a fact from my own experience looking at these books, okay? So you can do this with Peter Schiff's books. His books were all hyped up. Most of the people that I don't know to what extent, if any, Peter Schiff or any related parties were involved in review fraud, although I wouldn't put it past any of these people. But certainly you had delusional, low IQ morons that just give a 5-star review just because they like Peter Schiff's speeches. They like his garbage. They like his nonsense without realizing that his books are a joke. So, you have that situation going on. And of course, you're going to have the situation going on with respect to Michael Lewis, his books, his movies, and so forth. But read the one-star reviews, okay, of the books of these people, and you'll understand the reality. Okay. Same thing with the fraudster Tim Ferriss, who I'm going to be dedicating a lot of time and energy to expose here in the future. I've kind of come out a little bit here and there. I'll do it more in the future. But my point is that, of course, after Michael Lewis, his fictional portrayal hyped up Bass, of course, Bass is seen as this visionary. In reality, he's a salesman, a stockbroker salesman who made a bet. He gambled. He didn't predict the financial crisis. Kyle Bass, you did not predict the financial crisis. That is a fact. Kyle, you know who I am, Mike Stathis. Okay, we ran into each other. We had a few discussions after the financial crisis. As you know, you didn't predict it. You didn't. You bet on the financial crisis happening. Yes, you made a bet, but you didn't predict it. I predicted it. That's a fact. In fact, I'm the only person truly who really predicted the financial crisis. I've talked about that before. I will go up on a neutral platform. We'll have a consulting firm who will gauge the debate. I'll debate any credible person in the world on this for money, okay? For money, for a large sum of money. I'm the only person in the world who truly predicted the financial crisis. Think about that, and before you cast any doubts, understand what I mean by truly predicted, right? Just saying something's going to happen, it's not a prediction. If you're talking about a massive historic crisis, you can't just come out and say, oh, well, the banks are going to collapse and the economy is going to collapse. You can't do that's not predicting it. You have to provide detailed evidence, a detailed argument, right? And a written thesis. And you have to do it, okay, before it's obvious that there's problems. Okay? That's what I did. And assuming there were other people that did so, which there were not, I challenge anyone to show me. Now, if you say that there were people who wrote about it in detail, in a book, in advance, okay? And we'll say, 2007, it was already it was obvious to me that we were already having the blowout by the fall of 2007, okay? That was already happening, actually late summer. But if you think there were other people who did, then you haven't read my book, okay? And or you're not so, let's say, you're not the sharpest knife in the drawer. The other issue is, let's assume that there were, which there were not other people that wrote about it and predicted it in detail. What did those people say after the financial crisis, right? In fact, anyone who wrote about any type of issue as a result of the economy, the real estate bubble, so on and so forth, right around that time, such as Peter Schiff and all the other clowns out there who might have done so, maybe a handful of people, 3, 4, 5 people, and then you might want to add like a couple of people who have been saying the same thing in books for like decades. Those individuals, all of them have been bearish since that time. That's right. They've been broken clocks. I'm the only person who wrote anything about the collapse, who predicted it, who actually got people back into the stock market and have been bullish ever since that time. And you know why, folks? Because I'm a real analyst. I'm a legitimate world-class strategist and analyst. I'm not guys like Peter Schiff and Jim. These guys are Jim Rickards and Jim Rogers. These guys are marketing sales guys. They're broken clocks. They're clowns. Now, when it goes to fund managers, folks, anybody can make a bet, okay? And if that bet fails, no one's going to know about it. You understand that, right? Who do you think found out about Kyle Bass and his subprime collapse. And by the way, these guys didn't short Fannie and Freddie. I recommended people to short not only the subprimes, the banks, and the home builders, and Fannie and Freddie. I wrote it in a book. You can't hide that. You can't erase that once you put it out there. But if you make a bad bet as a fund manager, you just don't tell anybody, and no one finds out. You see? That's what happens. Kyle Bass, if he had made a bad bet, then the media may have not found out about it. Well, actually, they would have never found out about it because he was a nobody, right? And this is why now the media is finding out about his bad bets, because he's already in the spotlight, you see. In addition, if you make a bad bet as a fund manager, you can get out of the trade. You can hedge it, right? But if you write it in a book, you can't get out of it. So let me move on now, and I'm gonna end this intro video here by giving you a refresher on Kyle Bass. I talked about where he came from, and you know, he's I'm going to talk about now, you know, of course, the subprime. And the funny thing about, I've seen crazy things about people making claims about Kyle Bass, about how much he made. One copywriting shyster, John Malden, in fact, did an interview, which I exposed, I showed somewhere, talking about how he said Kyle Bass made billions off the subprimes. No, he didn't. No, he didn't, Malden. You're a liar, man. Why are you lying? And you see this thing, you know, you see people out there floating all this nonsense about anybody who has anything kind of a negative stance or profited from some type of a negative thing from the U.S. economy. And you specifically see that because you got these gold pumpers and that whole gold circuit, right? People talk about Doug Casey's made billions. What? Doug Casey's a failure. He's an investment failure. Think about it. Doug Casey claims to be so rich and wealthy and has all this and that and made all this. He's like near death. He's like, what, 75? Why the fuck is he still working? I mean, I'm basically semi-retired. And I only worked for, 15 years before I basically went semi-retirement? I mean, what? It's the same thing with Jim Rogers, right? All these guys. They're so successful, they got so much money, but why are they still working? Folks, the reason why I've talked about this before is because Jim Rogers, he makes his money off of perception and marketing and bullshit, blabbering his mouth. That's what gets him the paid speaking gigs at all these gold bug conferences. That's what gets him these paid board positions at all these hard asset types, resource companies, shady companies based in Russia, right, and all these other places. You understand, folks? That's how it works. Doug Casey, similar situation. Well, no one's going to put him on their board, but Doug Casey's got a different. He's selling his useless newsletters, and also he's involved in pitching all these stocks, front running, and I guess he's not dumb enough. Let's hope so. To do it illegally. You see, guys like Doug Casey, Rick Rule and Eric Sprott, that whole Jughead Circus factory of clowns, they know that I don't know if they're doing anything illegally in terms of illegal front running. I don't have any evidence of that. But I do know that what they do is they exploit the ignorance of their followers. And their followers are a bunch of low IQ, complete idiots. These people that believe all the gold myths and all this nonsense. They know zero about the investment markets. And so what they'll do, what Casey and Casey and company clowns will do, is they'll say like, oh, well, they'll have these pitchmen, these penny stock promoters, these pitchmen, these fraudsters like, what's his name? I forgot the guy, Future Money Trends, this piece of trash. The guy that used to shill and work for Jonathan Ledbetter, the National Inflation Association scam. But what they'll do is they'll get these guys to have these fake interviews. They're not real interviews. They're just kind of like paid pump pieces where they're kind of paying to get to promote them and their stocks. And they'll say, oh, well, look, this stock, this uranium stock, this great CEO, he's such a success. And by the way, this is a stock that Doug Casey's bought a lot of shares of, and Eric Sprott, they bought a lot of shares. And so the idiots behind these guys, by the way, the idiots that fall for these scam artists, and it's sad because these people are never going to make any money, and they still believe like Peter Schiff and hyperinflation and all this nonsense. It's almost like they're some type of a mental illness. They don't understand that. To me, when I see that, I'm thinking like, okay, so you're pumping this trash, these penny stocks, because Doug Casey and Eric Sprott and Rick Rule already own millions of shares. You're pumping it, right? They bought it at a low price, and they're pumping it now. You see, it's a kind of a legal pump. You see, but the sheep, they don't see it that way. Oh, well, Doug Casey guys, he's a great investor because everyone says he is. Of course, Doug Casey's a failed investor. Okay, I exposed Eric Sprott as well. And Eric Sprott's pump is silver, pump and dump. This guy, this is, you have to wonder why this guy has not faced any sanctions for this. He would go and he would go on YouTube and he'd pump silver and say all these things and get everyone to buy it. And then 2 weeks later, he would dump his silver. If that's not silver manipulation, I don't know what is. By the way, folks, of course, you don't hear about that. But anyway, so, Kyle Bass, of course, after his subprime success, he became a star gradually. It wasn't instant, but, kind of as the European sovereign debt crisis was unraveling, that's when he really got a lot of attention. And, of course, he made some bets against countries, Greece, some others, I believe. But really, he didn't really have a whole lot of success after 2008. And so he had, he actually made a lot more risky bets. And that's what these guys in the hedge fund industry do. You have to understand, if you want to make money in the hedge fund industry, you need to make big bets. Okay? Usually. There's exceptions. I'll get to it here in a second. But if you're in a small fund, you want to make a big bet, especially if you're a nobody. If you're off the radar, you're a new fund, you want to make a big bet and win. If you don't win, well, nobody knows. So what? Okay. You just, no one knows that you blew it. You can just go and raise more money on the side, and they're not going to know that you blew it. Right? You don't have to report your returns. Kyle Bass does not report his returns. He only reports them apparently when he does well. So he hasn't reported his returns for many years. So what these guys do is they want to make big bets for two reasons. The early guys, the young guys, the new funds, they want to make big bets so they can get in the media. Oh, God, he's efficient. Oh, he's so great. Right? And so they get all the money coming to them. The established guys, they also want to make some big bets because, remember, it's the 20% carry. They get 20% of the profits beyond the benchmark. And I've talked about this many times, the hedge fund benchmarking. It's a scam. Most of the benchmark for hedge funds is the S&P 500, which is a scam. It's a fraud. And the problem is that people don't understand that there's a good chance if you have a pension, there's a really, 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 really good chance that you're invested in hedge funds and you don't even know it. And that means you're getting defrauded. Okay, you're getting ripped off because the hedge fund industry is a complete scam in so many ways. I've talked about that a little bit. I'll talk about it more in the future, but I've already sidetracked so much that this video is not even going to address what I really wanted to initially address. I'm going to have to do it in another part. But so You want to take a big bet because you want to get more money coming to you. People think that you're a genius. You can make them a lot of money. You also get 20% of the profits. Problem is, of course, is when you blow up next time off that failed bet, well, there's no clawback. There's no clawback. You don't have to give back the money that you made the previous year. You see? You understand? So if you make 100% and the S&P returns, let's say you make 110%, the S&P returns are 10%. You get 20% of that 100% of those assets. That's your profit, in addition to the management fee. That's how hedge fund managers make their money. It's off that 20% carry. Okay. Now, when you're talking about very large funds like Ray Dalio, he's the world's largest hedge fund. Largest. You notice, folks, the media always talks the billionaire, largest hedge fund. They want to give you these little buzzwords because these people, when they talk about these things, there's nothing else to talk about them. They're not credible. They're clowns. Okay, you understand? Now, those of you who follow me know that I don't think a whole lot of Warren Buffett, really. Certainly, he's the most overrated investor in world history, without a doubt. You know, if Warren Buffett wasn't so hyped up, I'd have a lot more respect for him, I think. But I really don't have any respect for the man as an investor at all. Now, those of you who don't understand that, you're just lost in the woods. You don't know what you're talking about. Remember, I'm the financial professional here. If you're not a tenured financial professional, if you don't have anywhere near my track record of analysis, okay, and forecasting, then I don't care if you're a 30-year veteran or a 50-year veteran. You're probably not anywhere in my league to criticize me because you don't know jack shit, okay? Those of you who are members and subscribers, if you've and I haven't fully exposed Warren Buffett yet. It's going to take a lot more time. Hopefully, I'm going to be able to do it before he croaks, because I don't want to be seen as kind of an evil person to trash him after he croaks. That's not the intent. It just takes a while. I'm very busy. But those who have followed me, you all know I've exposed Warren Buffett on many occasions. But there's so many instances to expose him and to show you how he is overhyped by the media. Nonetheless, Warren Buffett is a credible investor. Okay, he made most of his money long time ago. That's why he hasn't managed to beat the S&P 500 over the past 15 years on average. Even though he's window dressed his Berkshire Hathaway, he's got all these guys in there loading it up with tech stocks, which of course he's always told everyone he doesn't understand tech. He doesn't want to have tech, but he's gotten desperate. But he still can't beat the S&P 500, right? Even though actually the benchmark for Buffett shouldn't be the S&P 500. Why? Because Warren Buffett doesn't distribute any dividends in Berkshire Hathaway. Although he's a value investor, he runs a value fund, he reinvests the dividends, right? And he gets large cash flow from Geico, from his insurance company. So he's able to dollar cost average. There's many reasons why the S&P is not even a fair gauge for Berkshire Hathaway, and certainly not a fair gauge for the vast majority of hedge funds. I'll go into all these points at some point another time. But my point is that even though I've been critical of Warren Buffett, and he's the most overrated investor in history, he's still credible. He's a credible investor. And, the Superman status that he's been afforded by the media, of course, makes certain that he's not criticized. You can criticize Warren Buffett for missing the financial crisis, which he did absolutely. Berkshire Hathaway lost $30 billion. Warren Buffett, I've argued that he engaged in illegal activity, insider trading, through his discussions that he had with the U.S. Treasury. Then he got involved with investments in Goldman Sachs, sweet deals in Goldman Sachs, General Electric, several other companies that were bailed out later on. And when Warren Buffett was part of convincing Americans to provide some type of support for the bailout so that they would not vote against their congressman, right? That was the whole deal. If you remember, back in 2008, congressmen were afraid that they wouldn't win a second term or another term if they voted for the bailout. So part of the campaign by the Washington, Warren Buffett was involved in going on TV and telling everyone that we needed the bailout, right? And of course, Warren, during that time or before that time, he never told people that he had already taken stakes in companies that were going to receive that taxpayer money. So you tell me that's not fraud. You tell me that's not fraud. Of course, Regen, Warren Buffett's insurance scam that he was called before to testify before Congress before the financial crisis a few years before, and then that kind of silently disappeared, faded. So there's many other things I could talk about Warren Buffett, but the bottom line, folks, it's kind of like for me to criticize Wall Street. I'm in a position where I can criticize Wall Street. And if I say Wall Street research is garbage, then that's different than some Joe Schmo off the street who hasn't worked in the financial industry, who doesn't know jack shit. For him to say Wall Street research is garbage, well, that's just not really valid. He's not legitimate enough to even criticize Wall Street research, you see. So anyway, getting back to Kyle Bass, let me just kind of remind everyone that as he had failures after the financial crisis,
terms of getting back as an investor, If it's coming down to here, almost irrespective of what's going on, I have to believe. If I have to make a call in advance, and of course I can change depending on what happens, but I have to believe this is where you want to start doing that 18, 17, around there. Their earnings report is a complete game changer, at least for quite a while. Bottom line, NVIDIA now is going to enter the realm of Tesla, Apple, and all these other big, I mean, listen, NVIDIA can come down to 150, come down to $100. If you don't think it's possible, then you don't understand how the market works. I mean, listen, NVIDIA can come down to 150, come down to $100. If you don't think it's possible, then you don't understand how the market works.